Hi everyone, welcome to video 2 of week 10 where we're going to talk about timeout and backup privilege removal. For this lesson, you're going to ultimately want your yellow book first, and we're going to go through a few of these pages, these worksheets, starting with 10.1.2 and then going up to 10.1.7. So go ahead and find that page that says getting ready to use timeout. So today we're going to talk about what to do when children do not comply with our family rules or parental directives. Research shows that brief, mild consequences, such as timeout, work well to remind children of the rules and stop misbehavior. Brief means no more than 5 minutes. By quickly sending a child to a neutral place with view of the parent, the child is able to get herself under control and stop the misbehavior. This is known as taking a timeout. So we're going to talk about the details of timeout. On this getting ready to use timeout worksheet, we have some steps that we have to follow before we are at the moment of timeout. So if my child is doing something, took a toy and is throwing it at a sibling, and I've deemed that they need a timeout, that is not going to be the time to implement the new timeout strategy. We need to have already created this prior to needing it. I want to remind you that when you are frustrated, upset, overwhelmed, you will always, always, always go to what you already know. And so if you have not done this yet, if you haven't put the thought in this yet, until you are to that moment, you are going to, you're not going to be successful in implementing a new skill. That's not when we learn best. Again, in week 4, when we were talking about ages and stages and those child jobs in each developmental stage, and the parents have their matching job to help the child through that child job, I had said that we have to anticipate or expect that our kids are going to practice these different less than desirable behaviors. I should expect that my 3-year-old is going to have a hard time sharing their toys with the other 3-year-olds at preschool. I should anticipate that. I should expect that, because that's typical for 3-year-olds to do that. So because I'm expecting that or anticipating that, I should prepare myself for what it is I'm going to do to respond to that situation. I'm not saying that timeout is always the best way to deal with that situation. I'm just giving it as an example of I need to anticipate that my children are going to have behaviors, that I'm going to have to use different strategies to teach them new skills. So the steps I need to go through when using timeout, before using timeout, is I need to select a place. And I want to have I want to be prepared. I want it to be safe and boring. I don't want distractions to be there, and I don't want family interactions. The room or area needs to be child-proof. I highlighted this section where it says good places for timeout are the laundry room or hallway. I would say hallway often can be, as long as it's safe. We don't want like a stairwell to be in it or anything. A laundry room, I would disagree with. In my laundry room, I have a lot of poisons and stuff that I don't want kids messing with or touching. Maybe other people's laundry rooms are a good place, but I would just want to caution that mine definitely would not be a good choice. I want to explain the process to the child, and Other curriculums will even teach you to practice it with your child. Okay, if this happens, then you're going to take a timeout, or you're going to take a break, whatever word I use to describe timeout. And this is what it's going to look like. This is where you're going to go sit. This is what you're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And we want to practice doing it. Again, discipline is not a shame-based thing. It is to teach a skill, or to teach responsibility. When I'm utilizing timeout, it's going to be almost always due to some sort of emotion regulation situation. I want them to take a break. I need them to step away and take a breather. And that's the skill I'm trying to teach. And so because it's a skill that I'm teaching and not this punishment where they lose their dignity, I want to feel comfortable in practicing it, and that this is just a normal thing we do. We just take breaks. We go in and take a pause. So practice timeout before it is needed, and be consistent. When I decide to use timeout, use it the same way each time. So remember, when we learn a new skill or try something new, we should expect that it's not going to work well, or it's not going to necessarily take well as soon as I start. I should anticipate that it's maybe going to be a little worse before it gets better. But I want to try things for at least 2 weeks before I rule it out. And I want to try it consistently. So if I tried it for 2 days and then didn't for 3 days and then tried again for a day and then didn't for a week and then tried again for a day and it didn't work, then that tells me that I didn't try it for 2 weeks. I want to be consistent with my behavior expectations. Although it may feel like our kids don't like it, because in the moment they don't, kids like clear expectations. They like to know what to expect. It's how they can feel safe, and it's how they can figure out how it is they should act. If we aren't consistent with our expectations for them, and they don't know in their interpretation of how the events go, if sometimes they get a timeout for yelling and screaming in the house and slamming the door, and sometimes they don't get that, then they're not going to understand. They're not going to understand what it is that causes these discipline incidents to happen, and it's going to not serve the purpose that we're wanting it to. It's not going to teach that responsibility like we're trying for it to. Okay, the next page is 10.1.3, preparing children for timeout. So I may say something like, when I ask you to do something, or I may even say, when I ask you to do this specific thing that we're working on, this specific trait, and you don't do it, or you do something else, you'll have a timeout. Timeout means you go to name of room or area for 5 minutes. 3, if you don't go, or if you argue, I will add 1 minute at a time. When we get to 10 minutes, you either go to timeout or you lose a privilege. When timeout or privilege loss is over, we're done with the problem. Any questions? Let's practice how it works. Something typical that I'll see parents do is say 1 minute for each year. I think that's fine. I don't know that it would get much worse, be much of a problem. However, again, timeout stops at 10 minutes. No longer then is it a timeout. If I'm going beyond 10 minutes, I want to be doing a privilege removal instead. Another thing is some kids are so apprehensive to the word timeout, it's already meant something that they don't like. If that's going to if kiddo's going to throw a tantrum because I say timeout, I may choose to use a different word when I'm teaching this new skill. Maybe I say break time or time in or chill out zone. Whatever it is that makes sense. Taking a breather. Come up with a different phrase if that word already means something. So using timeout, I want to start with something simple. One chore or request to practice using timeout. Label the behavior that earns timeout. For example, that's not following directions, or you didn't stop arguing, or I asked you to pick up your toys and you didn't do it. We want to be very, very specific. We don't want to just say something like you were being rude or you're not respectful. Those are abstract concepts. We want to be specific. 2, tell the child, go to timeout. 3, be calm and firm when giving timeout. 4, wait 15 seconds for your child to go. Use the 15 seconds to practice emotion regulation. It's really, really important that we are literally waiting that 15 seconds. So often we give our children a direction, and if they haven't complied within 2 seconds, we are barking at them again. Give them a few seconds. I count to 15 in my head. Give them that chance to comply. Give them a moment. Turn away, stare at the other wall, do some emotion regulation, and give them 15 seconds to comply. If a child stalls or argues, ignores, or otherwise refuses to go, at the end of 15 seconds, say, that's 6 minutes, so you can add another minute. Repeat this process, waiting 15 seconds between each directive, adding 1 minute at a time until you reach 10 minutes. For example, say, that's 7 minutes, then wait 15 seconds, and so on. So this, if we're starting at 5 and doing this over and over, this is going to be a few minute process. I want you to be prepared for that. The benefit to it being a slower process is our reaction is slower. It's giving the child time to comply, so it's not it's not fanning the flames of the fire. Instead, it's pausing. I want to give my child multiple chances to succeed at this. Once the child goes to timeout, set a timer for the amount of time. When the timeout is over, excuse the child from the timeout area. Don't talk to the child while they're in timeout. Remove yourself from the timeout area. Don't ask the child to think about what he did wrong. When timeout is over, don't make the child apologize. Interact with the child as you normally would after timeout is over. These ones are really, really important. We don't say, think about what you did wrong while they're there, because if I did timeout correctly, I've already said why they're there and I was specific about it. So there is no reason for me to say it now, think about what you did wrong. When the timeout is over, I don't want to make someone apologize. That's not what an apology is. An apology is something you feel. If they don't feel that, then I don't want to make them do it, because then it becomes inauthentic. I'm sure many of us know kids or adults that apologize even preemptively, even before they have done the thing wrong, and they don't actually know what an apology is. They it's just kind of a word or a phrase that is just used. We don't want our kids to learn that that's what apologizing is. We want them, I may suggest it, like, oh, you know, that really hurt my heart. And when I hurt someone's heart, I think it's good to tell them I'm sorry. But I don't want to create a new power struggle or force my children to be inauthentic. So it could be suggested, but it's not enforced. Interact with the child as you normally would after timeout is over. This is so important. After our children are disciplined and removed, after that situation has occurred, they are sensitive and they are feeling like maybe they're not good or they're bad or whatever else they may be feeling. You don't love me or like me anymore. We want to give them an immediate new chance to succeed so we can set the pace for the rest of the day. If they get out of timeout and then I passively aggressively ignore them and refuse to play with them because every time we play blocks you just throw it again, that's again being shameful. It's causing a loss of dignity. It's also making our love conditional, and that's not healthy for our kids. What I tell parents to do is, once your child has been removed from timeout, you have at most 1 minute to find something that they have done correctly and praise them for. So maybe they're excused from timeout and they walk over to the bookshelf and grab a book. Praise them for that. It makes my heart really happy that you love reading so much. Whatever it is that they go do next, find something to praise them for. That's going to be a nice refresh, to set a new pace, and it's going to make their rawness not as impactful for them. Okay, troubleshooting timeout. Timeout can have problems. 1, if you get to a 10-minute timeout and the child still refuses through arguing, ignoring, or stalling, give a choice. That's 10 minutes of timeout or lose a privilege from a 30-minute to 2-hour time slot. Preschoolers would lose a privilege for 30 minutes. School-age children for 1 to 2 hours. For example, take a 10-minute timeout or lose television privileges from 6 to 8 tonight. I think that it's noteworthy that it's half an hour to 2 hours is what it is. Sometimes parents feel like, nope, it should be a week grounding or even more than that. Again, just like how we just want to give our kids, when we take them out of that timeout, we want to give them that new chance to succeed. It's the same thing. They've lost that privilege. We don't need to harp on what has caused this. They can lose that privilege and be done with it and move forward without it having a monumental impact. 2, if a child still refuses to go to timeout, restate the privilege loss. Okay, no TV from 6 to 8 p.m. tonight. Ignore testing behavior. Do not respond to testing behavior while you are adding time to the timeout. State the steps calmly. Wait 10 seconds and then continue. Do not get pulled into an argument with the child. It's very important to be calm and stay in full control of your actions. Be specific. Don't use extra words. Stick with the script. Use emotion regulation. If a child is unable to settle down in timeout, go to the timeout area and say, timeout starts when you are quiet, then leave again without saying anything else. If a child is still unable to settle down after a few minutes, or if a child's behavior is so offensive that you feel yourself getting very angry, then say, you seem unable to take a timeout. Instead, you will lose this privilege from this amount of time. If the child makes a mess in the timeout area, at the end of the timeout, say, I see you've made a mess while you've been here. You may come out when you've cleaned up the mess. If the child refuses, move to a privilege removal. For example, you will lose television privileges from 6 to 8, and you may not watch TV after that unless this mess is cleaned up. 7. Regarding your first request, if the child took the timeout or lost the privilege, you are starting over. Wait a while before restating your request. If the child does not comply, treat this as a new non-compliance with the timeout process beginning again. So here's some examples of troubleshooting timeout. Mom says, wash your hands and come to dinner. Child ignores and stalls for 15 seconds. Mom waits out the 15 seconds without saying a word. Mom practices emotion regulation during the 10 seconds. Mom, at the end of 15 seconds, Mom says, I asked you to wash your hands and come to dinner. You can wash your hands and come to dinner or go to timeout. Child, I don't want to, I'm not hungry. Mom ignores comments and waits 15 seconds from her previous directive. At the end of 15 seconds, Mom says, go to timeout. The child either takes the timeout or loses a privilege after the parent has added 1 minute at a time for no more than a total of 10 minutes of timeout. So that's one example. You can feel free to pause the video and read the next one on your own. So then we have backup privilege removal. So we use backup privilege removal when timeout isn't working. When children refuse timeout or can't settle down to take a timeout, they lose a privilege. Privilege removal lasts longer than timeout. Timeout lasts 5 to 10 minutes. Privilege removal lasts from 30 minutes for younger children or up to 2 hours for school-age children. Select a privilege loss that is reasonable but meaningful to the child. Make a list of reasonable but meaningful privileges to remove ahead of time so that you don't have to think up something in the heat of the moment. Keep rewards and lost privileges separate. Do not take away rewards that children have earned. State privilege loss, then separate yourself from the child. Avoid conflict and arguments by giving everyone space to regain their self-control. The privilege loss should happen as soon as possible. To deal with the problem quickly, remove the privilege as soon as possible. Follow through with privilege removal. If you forget or change your mind, privilege removal will not work for changing your child's behavior. Be consistent. Do not respond to child's words. Children sometimes say they don't care about losing a privilege. Ignore their words and follow through. Sometimes they promise to be good forever. Encourage good intentions, but still follow through. Sometimes parents choose to go directly to privilege removal. Some families may feel that certain behaviors are so completely unacceptable, such as little boy flipping the game board in the video or calling a parent a name, that they may choose to go directly to privilege removal. You know what is right for you and your family. If a particular behavior so violates one of your family values that you feel you need to jump to privilege removal, you have that right as a parent and as a leader of your family. Remember, however, that the same guidelines apply. Model appropriate behavior. Don't argue. Give clear directions. Use emotion regulation, and remain calm and in charge. And then here's some examples of privileges to remove. Make sure the privilege is something you can control and the privilege is meaningful. So maybe a favorite toy, electronic game, TV program, video game. Take away the controller. This is because you don't need to make a big show of disconnecting the PlayStation from the TV and all the cords and wires. Just take the controller and walk away. Cell phone, computer access, bike, skateboard, inline skates, other sports equipment, dessert, music player, going to a friend's house, playing outside, inviting a friend to a family event, having a friend over, favorite game. I'm sure that we can think of more as well. Okay, and I'm going to end this video here, and then we will have our third one next.